Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And okay, so without much ado, I'll just share my screen. Okay, is my presentation screen visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, Ayushwan was the name that we finally came up for the landscape or the therapeutic garden that we proposed in AIIMS Bhopal. So, good morning, everybody. As I'm already introduced, so I'll not waste much of your time and quickly go through what and how I approached my thesis in my master's. So, my topic was landscape design for patients with dementia, a focus on Alzheimer's disease, and my site was in AIIMS Bhopal. So, the flow of presentation would be vision and objectives.
You are not audible, ma'am.
I'm not audible.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am. Now you are audible, ma'am.
Okay. So the from beginning I am not audible. I wasn't audible.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now I'm audible and my screen is visible.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Okay. Yeah. So I was saying that without much ado, I'll just introduce what and how I approached my thesis in my master's. So Ayushwan is the name that at the end we came up with a thesis that was made or that was proposed in AIIMS Bhopal. So AIIMS Bhopal was my site. So initially the idea of this entire thesis was to create a prototype. That's where we began. That prototype that would retrofit in any kind of hospital that is any kind of hospital environment. But then later on, we moved forward to choose a site which was AIIMS Bhopal. Okay, so the flow of presentation, I think all of you saw this. Firstly, we'll discuss the vision and the objectives, then issue identification from mainly from literature study, then the challenges on the existing site, learning incorporation and concept development, and then the final outcome. The vision is to propose a was to propose a model landscape garden for dementia patients for inclusion, risk reduction, to raise awareness and lower the stigma about dementia worldwide, to make dementia a health priority, to support and empower people living with dementia and their care partners. So the aim is to establish healing through landscape for patients, especially with dementia, by in-depth study of existing literature on hospital, healing, and therapeutic landscapes, and applying the study in case of AIIMS Bhopal. Okay. So to begin with, we understood the needs and requirements of patients suffering from dementia. So these are mainly the objectives. Then we tried to understand the theories of landscape, theories of healing and therapy, and its implications. Then we identified various spatial elements with therapeutic value for treating dementia and other diseases. And then we selected relative site and for proposal and analysis of the existing site condition and creating a synthesis map, CLDP. I think all these terms you are already aware of. Okay, so these were the objectives. So, moving with issue identification. So, how did we identify the issues? Before I start telling you what were the issues, was I was guided to go through or read several existing research papers, so around 20 to 30 of them, and identify common issues that patients were facing. These research papers were majorly on therapeutic gardens or somewhere about how to take care of patients suffering from dementia. So all these it all the, these this slide and the slide which is coming up would be majorly the outcome or the condensed form of the output, which were majorly like issue identification for these patients. So the first one is lack of motivation to move outdoors and experience garden, absence of patient friendly environment, agitation that's caused due to improper planning. So these are the issues in existing gardens for dementia patients. Requirement of constant supervision, discomfort due to microclimatic problems like glare and heat trap, lack of universal design and barrier free design for patients, incorrect choice of plant palette, use of improper and disoriented furniture and signages, incapability of providing socio-interactive privacy, ill maintenance of garden and open spaces by the staff. So as you can see that this is the base plan of the existing site. This okay. So this part which you see on the top is the main hospital block. This is the dentistry block. We have an auditorium. We have hostel blocks here. We have playground. So firstly, we tried to understand that on the entire site, how much area, as you can see in this pie chart, is open and green area. What is the area left for future expansion? What is the total built up area? And how much area goes for roads and circulation. So out of all the area that was available for open space and green area, there were several categories of open spaces that were there. So we had parking area, which was in the beginning. You can see this here. Then we had divider or planter bed. We had incidental open spaces, courtyard, We had area for future expansion, playground, barren land, paved areas, and designed open spaces. Okay, so in order to understand the hydrology, because this was a fully functional campus, we tried to I tried to make a water balance or a water budget. Okay, so from which I came to know that the total demand, like the total amount of water that's coming to this site in form of precipitation, is higher than the actual demand of the site. So this could help in making the building net zero or the campus net zero. Okay, so then I tried to understand zoning and circulation. So the as you can see that on the beginning part of the site you have all the hospital zones, then you have the service blocks, then you have the academic zone, and then the residential zone. The residential zone was majorly student residential zone. Also here I have tried to show roads, like the circulation in two different ways. So firstly, this is one is according to the hierarchy of roads, and the other is according to the usability of the roads. So the roads that are used most are wider, and the roads that are less used are narrow. So this is just an interpretation, and this is the actual hierarchy of the road. Then we have the activity mapping. So we had three main types of user group. We had doctors, we had patients and visitors, and then we had students and interns. So this is the individual activity mapping throughout the day, and this is a composite activity mapping. So this majorly shows that more or less the entire campus was in use throughout the day. Now, this was one of the most important things that I came through while my study of this campus. So, this was microclimatic study. So, what we did is, sorry. So, what we did is, what I did is, I found I took two different times of the year. This is around January, December, January, and this map was made around May and June. So the shadow that was cast by the existing buildings in the campus at 9 o'clock, 12 o'clock, and 3 o'clock, I mapped that, and this in a similar in both these months, and then I made this composite map for the entire year, where the blue parts show that areas that are shaded throughout the year. The lighter blue is not shaded only during summer noons, and then we have shaded throughout a season. Then gradually the reddest parts are the non-shaded roads and rooftops. So this made us understand that due to lack of plantation and very few meaningful landscape intervention, this site would become very hot and not user friendly during summers. And as most of you have been or are experiencing Bhopal, the summers in Bhopal is very, very hot. Now, after the entire analysis, I came up with a synthesis map, and I did a kind of SWOT analysis with the strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats of the site. Now, this is the bubble diagram which we all make while before we begin our design. So, what are the kinds of spaces that we will need? I tried to jot it down, and the kind of activities that would happen in those places were also um, you know narrowed down. This is a overall CLDP with mood sketches. I think you all are aware of what a mood sketch is, with all the nodes and visual windows. I try to highlight all the nodes and visual windows and move forward with move forward with various moods for various kinds of landscaped areas. And then I went forward to detail the entire site in 3 to 4 different parts. So the first one is a CLDP for the parking plaza, which is here, the red area. Then the comprehensive landscape development plan for the student plaza, which is this, the blue area. And finally, the landscape development plan for the healing garden. So the healing garden was proposed in this green area. The major reason of proposing the healing garden in this green area was that it had good access from with the hospital and the academic block both. Also, there is this mini dispensary of Ayush Mantralaya of Government of India. So we thought of using the Ayurvedic, having the Ayurvedic touch to the entire garden. So it included herbal garden, the garden for reflexology, water garden, color garden, wildlife garden, bird baths, permaculture, music garden, container gardens, horticultural therapy garden, and a water garden again. Okay. So design guidelines. Again, these design guidelines were derived from uh, the n number of papers that we read. So we identified the issues there, and from their observations and inferences, we derived these guidelines. So there were guidelines for circulation spaces. There were guidelines for how we could connect the inside and the outside. Then there were guidelines for therapeutic design principles. There were guidelines for spatial quality. There were guidelines for planting design. So what we did and how did we arrive at these guidelines? If I walk you through that, so we first read the papers, we understood the inferences, we jotted down. So there were papers that had common design guidelines in them, so we jotted down everything, and then we categorized them, and hence you see the final outcome. Okay, so how did the concept develop? So for an Alzheimer's patient, the touch or things around them which would trigger their memory is very important. So the memory is triggered through smell, sound, vision, taste, and feel. So the five sense organs are majorly the ones that would help you trigger the memory. And after all this, one small area which you can consider is your spirituality. So the entire CLDP that we made was divided and subdivided into other parts, which included the following that you can see on your screen. So there were few which were associated with smell, then sound, vision, taste, feel, and spirituality. There were few, as you can see, that are falling in 2 or 3 different categories. Like you can see a water garden in sound also, and you can see the water garden in vision also. Likewise, you can also see a Zen garden in spiritual part, and then you can see a Zen garden in vision as well. So, majorly, we tried to introduce things that were more stimulating to sensory organs. Then the next challenge was to understand or to develop the form. So the major form was developed by we wanted one continuous loop according to the design guideline. There had to be a continuous loop that would encircle the entire design space. So this is how we came up with the entire, like, the loop. We made different radius circles so that we can zone our activities there, and then we connected all of them in similar fashion. This is the healing therapy garden. Okay, so the entire continuous path would have different experience. So this was one conceptual sketch of, if you're moving in the garden, like in a continuous garden, what are the different kinds of things you will come across. So herbal garden, then you had Rashivan, reflexology, plazas, wildlife garden, horticultural therapy, mounds, music garden, color garden, bird baths, and then Zen garden. So this is not the exact order. This is the main conceptual thing that we came up in the beginning. This is the landscape master plan. So here onwards, I'm changing and tilting it to this way for the better orientation and better fitting into the slide. So you can see there's a continuous path. I would like to, yeah. So you have the yellow ones are the access to the garden through the buildings, and the red ones are the access to the garden from the road. Then you have the lawn mounds. You have herbal gardens, Rashivan, Nakshatravan, reflexology path, meditation area, labyrinth path, water garden, wildlife garden, bird bath, hydrology, horticultural therapy garden, the plaza, permaculture, flower mound, music garden, and lawns. Also, a seating area in a residential open space. This is how the garden looks. So this is majorly to hide the plant palette and show the variation that a patient would feel in the garden throughout the year. The same thing in section. Okay. So there are few reasons why few things were provided. I'll just read through this. So the seating deck was placed in a tropical garden-like setup in order to provide the sense of refuge to the users. Lawn mounds provided wood between the building and the garden and provide a large chunk of informal sitting and interaction space. The area paved with for sorting and drying of herbs. Okay, so because this herbal garden, so there's a paved area where you can sort and you can dry your herbs. Plants planted in radial section for ease of segregation and harvesting. Large trees and bushes to provide enclosure in the garden. A very celebrated entry with a herbal trellis and water feature to mark it distinctly. Nakshatravan and Rashivan not only add up to trees with medicinal value but also give spirituals of healing to the users. This space is more of an educative approach to astronomical science, mythology, and landscape. Water edge planting for providing pure, cool, and clean water, and little protection for the shoreline. Also, this would introduce small water habitat. So we'll have this area will have its own little ecosystem, or biodiversity. Like, the idea was to introduce a little biodiversity there. Dense man-made bare forest affect the sense of escape to the user. So there was also a trail that would go through this man-made forest. Trees with seasonal variation to create interest in the plaza. Now you had a buffer of sensory flowers for the users that stimulate olfactory and trees that shed. So majorly the plants or the sensory flowers that were used here was were the ones which have Indian origin, and this was a raised lawn for visual connectivity. Okay, and yet this would discourage movement from outside to inside, and this entire uh, horticultural therapy area had only one access, that was through hospital. Then we had flower mounds that were raised high for ease of accessibility of planting and plucking and direct visual connection. Then we had ground cover for open and few free movement of for the sense of openness. So you can see that there are areas that where we tried to put the sense of enclosure. There are areas where you try to put the sense of openness, and then there are areas like this where there is a selective amount of prospect and refuge. So these are some of the views. View to the herbal garden, Rashivan, reflexology path, labyrinth path, the bird bath, wildlife garden, flower garden, permaculture, flower mound, music garden, the seating area, horticultural therapy garden, container garden, plaza. And this was the entire. I've put these majorly for the ones who might appear for their thesis this semester. So this is how the process of this entire thing was. So we kept changing the form. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was an amazing presentation. So now
Thank
the
you.
platform is please ask if you have any questions. Are there any questions? So I have a question. So how was your experience during this process? Like,
Um, experience during the process. Can you please
Of
explain it a bit?
designing.
Of
Of
designing. Okay.
designing.
Yeah. So
Yes.
if you like if you were throughout the presentation, so my guide throughout this was Sonal ma'am. So I not only learned a lot of things which you can see here, but there were several other things. As I said in the beginning of the presentation, the entire idea of the thesis was initially to create a prototype. Okay, so it was on a very different tangent in the beginning, but later on with the process, during the process, we understood that we would need a site and all that. So the idea or the approach to the thesis changed in middle of it. So it was overall a very good experience, I would say, and it was a memorable one. And this entire process, I would also like to take it further. So one small suggestion that I would have for the ones who are giving thesis this time, that please choose a topic that you can, because you do a lot of research, 1 year of research for this entire process of thesis, the master thesis. You have pre-thesis and thesis. So if you take up a topic that you can, study further, it would be very, very useful for you. Did I answer your query?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Anybody having any other question to ask? If not, then we can conclude this session here.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for being such a patient and lovely audience.
Thank you, ma'am, for this insightful session, and thank you all for joining.